Welcome to Reading Rural, y'all, where we talk about all things rural YA literature and to the rural authors who write it. I'm your host, Dr. Shay Parton, and I'm excited to talk to you about today's topic at hand. If you're a teacher, student, or community member in a rural community, my hope is that the content here honors you and your experiences by discussing and analyzing books that can serve as a mirror for you. If you're an urban or suburban teacher, student, or community member, this series is for you too, and I hope that it can provide nuance to the stereotypical depictions of rural people so often seen in popular media. So come on in, and let's get to it. Hey, and welcome back. I hope that the new year and spring semester are off to a great start for y'all. I also hope that you found some time to reflect on Martin Luther King Jr. and everything that has changed and everything that still needs to change. Even though I feel like I tend to use that day as a catch-up day for all of my work, I also try to make time to think about where we've been, where we are now, and where we need to go in terms of racial equity and really every kind of equity in this country. So I hope you found some time to do that too. Purdue's already back in session, and so I'm excited to be working with my transition to teaching students again this semester. It's funny, while I was preparing for this episode, one of my students who's currently on emergency permit for math preemptively apologized for her grammar in a discussion post. And as you can imagine, that happens a lot when folks find out I'm an ELA teacher. And I always think, what are we doing? Why do we teach writing in such a way that it makes students embarrassed and apologetic to express their ideas? I've written about experiences around this in my own life regarding my rural language variety, and I'll include a link to that in the description below. But I just wanted to do this episode about using Terena Elizabeth Bell's Tell Me What You See to offer students opportunities to inquire into purposes for and ways of writing, and to think about what writing is for, and that it's not just for being measured against some white middle class language measuring stick. So anyway, that's going to be the focus of this episode. There are a lot of reasons we write. We write to think, we write to tell stories for entertainment, we write to process trauma, we write to enter into and dissolve various kinds of partnerships. We write because we need to, on a basic human level, for our mental and emotional well-being, as well as to be contributing citizens to a society, whether that's through art, writing as art, or writing as contractual, or writing notes to one another to communicate. I mean, we write for so many different reasons. And none of those things look the same, and they shouldn't, because each written piece is meant for a unique purpose and written by a unique person. And I think every single story in Bell's collection demonstrates that really beautifully and really powerfully. One thing that keeps coming up again and again with my pre-service teachers is the issues and problems that they and students are facing as they try to come back to what school was like before the pandemic and what school wants them to be post-pandemic, even though we're not really truly post and never will be. It will always be with us. And using that before COVID as a measuring stick by which to judge the after, which doesn't make a lick of sense to me. But that attempt to move back to what was without processing everything that we went through, the collective trauma we experienced, seems supremely unhelpful at best. So using Bell's story #CoronaLife offers the perfect opportunity to make space for students to consider their experiences during the pandemic and how those are inextricable to their places, whether those be rural or otherwise. And more than that, hashtag Corona Life is a physical representation of our multiple and layered identities that sometimes occupy third spaces, and that can be tricky to navigate. So if you're not focusing on COVID necessarily in your curriculum, this could still be a useful activity for you and your students to think about how writers use the physical space of the page and why they make those kinds of decisions. So here's the plan, and here's how I do it. First, we would read and collectively annotate Belle's story as a class. Students would work in small groups first, where I asked them to read the story through one time like a reader and ask what they notice about how the story affects them, how it makes them feel, what it makes them think about. And then they'd read it one more time as writers. What did Belle do as a writer that helped them feel and think those things that they felt and thought? What writerly moves are they jealous of and wish they would have come up with themselves? And then, since my focus is space and place, I'd ask them to consider how the story plays with place and space through the use of the page. How does Belle manipulate the space of the page to reflect what she's considering in terms of geographic place outside of it? How does she make her form reflect her content? And then while students are reading and discussing, I'd walk around to listen and confer with groups as they're working. And then using some learning that they did as a result of the pandemic. Everybody likes to talk about learning loss, but students learned how to do a lot of things that they had never done before because of the pandemic, and they're coming with new learning that we can use in the classroom. I'd ask them to take notes on a class Jamboard or slides presentation where they're collaborating as groups in digital spaces to sort of record and remember what they talked about as their groups. So in Jamboard or slides, they could then record what they talked about as groups and then also look through everything else that the other groups noticed and wrote down. And then we'd use that together as a whole class to debrief. Based on their readings and noticings, they then apply some of the techniques that they noticed Belle using in a story of their own. So they would take the techniques that they observed in Belle's story and then write stories of their own. It wouldn't have to look exactly the same, but it should be evident that they were applying what they learned as readers. When they had finished their stories, we'd then create a class, either like literary magazine or almanac of sorts, or a short story collection of our own to share with the school and community through both print and digital means. Canva has really great editing stuff where you can make magazines look like actual magazines. I've used them before in my writing methods courses. And so students always feel really good about how their writing looks in that format. So I highly recommend checking that out. So the purpose of writing is not to be grammatically correct. And sometimes it can actually give you more power and credibility if it's not correct in specific ways. But being able to experiment and play with language in ways that help us find new and interesting ways to process who we are, things we've survived, where we're from, and what that means about who we're becoming, just all the things, is crucial to our progression as a society and as human beings. So I definitely be taking the opportunity for Belle and her stories to help guide my students in that endeavor, and you know that I'd recommend you do the same. So stay tuned and check back next week for the Author Talk episode where Belle and I sit down to chat about the collection and what it means to be a rural outmigrant. So many of these conversations feel like I'm just sitting down to chat with old friends, and this was definitely one of those. Belle is amazing, and you don't want to miss it, I promise. So if you take up these ideas and use them in any way in your classroom, I would love to hear about it. And if you read Belle's story collection and want to chat about it, I'd love to hear that too. So let me know what you think. Well, I hope you all enjoyed this week's episode. If you like what you heard and want to support the show and keep it a viable endeavor for me, it'd be great if you would like and comment on the YouTube episode. You could talk about what you liked most or what you walked away with. It'd also help if you'd subscribe to the channel. You can also head over to the Support Us page on the Literacy in Place website. There you can learn about all the different ways you can support this work. Like, you can like and follow the website itself, find out where to engage with us via social media, and go leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. Or you could shop our storefront on bookshop.org to get the book featured in this episode or any other books that catch your eye. You could also buy us a coffee at ko-fi.com and donate once or set up a recurring donation. All of this would be immensely helpful in keeping this show going. So thanks a bunch for doing what you can. Well, that's it for this episode. Until next time, y'all come back now, would ya?